State's ready.
Yes, before we bring the jury in, may we ask one scheduling question for today, Your Honor?
Sure.
We want to make sure we have witnesses here for the full time. If it reaches 4:30 and calling the next witness would take us beyond 5 o'clock, do you still want us to have that witness here?
If we'll be done by 6.
If we'll be done by 6.
Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted, before we call this witness in, we've already placed the call. Just wanted to make sure, Your Honor.
I will, like I said before, I try to get as close to 5 as possible, but before then, if it's going to be really long, but as late as 6, so.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay.
With that, the state is ready, Your Honor.
You need a minute for Mr.
If you
Hunter?
give us
or
1 minute for
you
Mr.
got
Hunter.
it?
He's just going to confirm
Yes, ma'am.
calling that witness in.
Okay. Better to have more than not enough.
Yes, Your Honor. Yes, Your Honor. Yes.
Ready?
Yes, Your Honor.
Defense is ready?
Defense is ready, Your Honor.
For the record, both assistant state attorneys are present, both defense counsel and Mr. Sievers. Bring them out.
Yes, sir.
Please be seated. I'll ask our jurors again, did you follow my instructions, not talk about the case among yourselves with anybody else, or look up any of the people or places involved? Even if you did so inadvertently, now would be the time to raise your hand and let me know. For the record, no jurors lifted their hand. Next witness.
The state calls Michael Downs.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I did.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Would you state your name for the record, please?
Lieutenant Michael Downs. Downs is D-O-W-N-S.
And where are you employed?
With the Lee County Sheriff's Office.
And Lieutenant Downs, how long have you been employed at the Lee County Sheriff's Office?
Over 12 years.
And what your current rank is lieutenant. Let's talk about back in July of 2015. What were your duties at the Lee County Sheriff's Office?
I was a detective assigned to the Lee County Sheriff's Office Homicide Unit.
And how long have you been assigned to the Lee County Sheriff's Homicide Unit?
I started with them in 2014.
And what are some of the duties of someone assigned to the Lee County Sheriff's Homicide Unit?
Obviously, your main purpose for being there is homicide investigations. At that time, it was homicide, violent crimes, and death investigations. In doing that, obviously you're assigned cases, you're tasked with investigating them, conducting statements, meeting with witnesses, meeting with victims, reviewing case material, things of that nature.
Back on June 29th of 2015, were you working on that particular day?
Yes.
And were you in the office when a call came in to respond to Jarvis Road?
Yes, I was.
And were you the on-duty homicide detective that day?
Yes, I was working. That was one of my normal days of work, to be in the office.
No, it was one of your normal days of work, but were you the next in line for the next homicide, or why did... Well, let me withdraw that. Did you end up going to 27034 Jarvis Road?
I did.
Did you respond initially when the call came in, or did you respond sometime later?
Yes, I was sitting next to the detective who would have been the next person in line for that specific homicide. Obviously, he gave me the preliminary details about what we know had occurred at that time, and I responded in unison with him, different vehicles to the scene.
And do you remember about what time you arrived at the scene?
Yes, it was sometime after 10:35 in the morning.
And what's your standard, is there a standard protocol when you arrive at the scene of a potential homicide?
Yeah, we have a general course of, a general process that we go through upon response.
And would you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what that general process is when you respond to the scene of a potential homicide?
Yeah, normally with any potential homicide or pretty much any major scene, we'll brief initially, then we'll go in and get a look at the scene itself. But before doing so, obviously for protection against us, preservation of evidence so that we don't disturb the crime scene. We'll put on latex gloves. We call them booties, but they're protective shoe coverings, and things of that nature, depending on the situation.
Now, we talked about responding to 27034. Let me show you what's been introduced into evidence as State Exhibit number 3, and I think I'll just put it here. Let me put it here, State's Exhibit number 3A. Well, I'll master this one of these moments. Is this the residence of the homicide to which you responded on June 29th, 2015?
Yes, it is.
So you talked about the normal precautions you take in responding to a potential homicide scene. Did you take those when you responded to this potential homicide scene?
Yes, I did.
And when you arrived or during your time there, did you make any particular observation? Well, tell me what you first did when you arrived at the homicide scene.
Initially, upon responding to the scene, naturally there were other people there outside. We got an initial brief from one of the first responding deputies who told us basically, it just gave us a brief overview about what had occurred upon their response. And then my next move was to actually look inside the residence and confirm that a crime had been committed if possible.
Tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury how you first looked inside the residence to confirm that a crime had been committed.
Naturally, like I said, obviously we put on our protective equipment to preserve the scene, preserve our own safety. Once we do that, I walked in through the garage. I walked through the garage into the entryway of what appeared to be what looked like the laundry room, which led right into the kitchen. Then looked into the kitchen, took a preliminary look at what had actually occurred in there. And then I exited the residence.
For that first time when you walked into the home, did you walk all throughout the home?
I did not do a full walkthrough of the house at that time.
So let me just put back up State's Exhibit 3A. I am going to hand you a laser pointer. You indicated that you walked in through the garage. Did you walk in through the doors of the garage, through a side door of the garage? When you talk about the garage, what are you speaking about?
No, my initial entrance was through this area of the garage to the left of the minivan.
Thank you. Now, you indicated that you did an initial walkthrough into the garage, and then you came back. You walked through the garage into the kitchen and then came back out. What did you next do at the scene?
At that point, being that I was at that point, I'm basically a support unit because I'm not the lead detective on the unit. I'm there purely for assistance at this point. I exited the residence. As others showed up and as my superior showed up, I was directed to complete a neighborhood canvass.
And what's a neighborhood canvass? Can you explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, when you use the phrase neighborhood canvass, what you mean?
Yes. When we conduct a neighborhood canvass, it basically means we go door to door, we speak to residents in the surrounding area or surrounding blocks, depending on the extent of the crime scene or what we're looking for. When we do that, we're looking for victimology, so basically background on the victim or background on the family, if they saw anything suspicious, if they have any video or anything that can aid us in our investigation.
And were you the only detective participating or conducting a neighborhood canvass at that time?
No, there were several of us at that time.
And for you, every door that you knocked on, did somebody answer?
No.
Is that typical, atypical?
It's common, especially for that part of the day. It's likely most people are at work.
Now, did you come across, during your neighborhood canvass, anybody who had seen anything the night before, provided you any information about the night before and what had possibly occurred inside the home?
No.
Did you later that day go back into the home and do a walkthrough around the home?
Yes, it was later that night.
And did you don any protective clothing before you went back in?
Yes, it was
protective gear?
same situation as our original entrance. It was latex gloves and protective shoe coverings.
And then you indicate you did a walkthrough. When you did this walkthrough later that night, where did you go?
At this particular time, I went through most of the house. I'm not particularly looking through anything. I'm just I'm just looking at the scene, and that was particularly, I believe, around the time where they were getting ready to remove Dr. Sievers' remains from the residence.
Now, when you talk about you're just trying to get a feel for the scene, explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what you mean by that.
Basically, as an investigator, obviously you have curiosities and things of that nature. So initially upon going in, you don't really know what you have or what evidence is laying around and things like that. So you want to disturb the scene as much as possible until our crime scene personnel get there. At this particular time, it gave me an opportunity to look at the house, get a layout for the house, and make my own, I guess, personal observations about what could have occurred or if I saw anything that maybe somebody else didn't. It's basically a second set of eyes.
And did you say disturb or not disturb the house as much as possible or the scene?
No, not disturb the house as much as possible.
Now, when you did this walk through the night of the 29th, did anything strike you in terms of the house, in terms of, did you make any observations about whether it might have been ransacked?
Initially, and looking at it, it didn't appear to be ransacked, no.
Now, after that night, what was your next significant involvement in this case, next date of significant involvement?
My next significant involvement would come into play around July 9th in the evening hours.
Now, between July 29th and July 9th, were you working other cases?
I was, yes.
Now, July 9th, how did it come about that on July 9th you got re-involved in this particular case?
I happened to be in the office working late. I was working another homicide, and at that time, Detective Nolan and I sat close to each other, and it came to my attention that we received information pertaining to his homicide. So naturally, being interested, I pretty much accompanied him into looking into that. Accompanied him into looking into it. Sorry.
Thank you.
When you talk about you received additional information, was this a call from Chief Hamilton from a port authority out in Illinois?
Yes.
And with that information that was received from Chief Hamilton, what did you do, or what did you end up doing?
Based on the information that we were able to obtain from the conversation, I later wound up having to go out to Illinois to follow up with that lead.
And when did you go out to Illinois to follow up with that lead that came in from Chief Hamilton?
That would be the very next day.
Did you go by yourself?
I did not. I was with my partner, David Levitt.
And so you flew out to, was that Illinois the next day, July 10th?
Yes, ma'am.
And what were you expecting to get out of flying to Illinois?
Initially, we didn't. At that time, it was information. It was a lead that we had to follow up on. I didn't anticipate getting too much from that direct contact at that time.
When you arrived in Illinois, did you speak with Chief Hamilton?
Yes,
Did you speak with somebody else called Rose Grunner?
I did.
And did Rose provide you the name of an individual who hadn't been on your radar before that?
She did. She provided the name Curtis Wainwright.
After she provided that name, what steps or what further investigation did you begin to take?
Based on that and the information that we obtained, it actually it was very credible information based on what we knew.
Objection, Your Honor. This is sustained.
Based on
What steps did you take? Go on.
Based on the information that we had obtained, we responded into Missouri, into Jefferson County. That's the county where Curtis Wright actually resided, and we made contact with that jurisdiction's law enforcement there.
Now, why did you make contact with that jurisdiction's law enforcement? Is that some type of standard procedure?
Yeah, being that we're certified law enforcement officers in the state of Florida, it's common for us to make contact if we go out of our jurisdiction, and they will assist us in any legal process that we need.
So if another jurisdiction was coming here, would you assist that jurisdiction if they came here?
Yes, we do it commonly.
And now, let me just go back to that conversation with Ms. Grunner. Did she say anything about a murder during that conversation?
Objection, Crawford.
Overruled.
She did not.
Now, when you went to to Jefferson County, to their law enforcement agency, to whom did you speak?
Additionally, I spoke to their lieutenant, Lieutenant Dolan.
And was a search warrant ultimately obtained for the residence of Curtis Wainwright?
Yes, it was.
And when was that search warrant executed?
We executed July 12th of 2015.
I want to show you what's been previously marked for identifications as states 33A and B and previously shown to defense counsel. Let me show you states 33A and B. What are states 33A and B?
Exhibit 33A is a photograph taken from the rear of Curtis Wright's residence. And 33B is a photograph from the front left of the residence.
Do these photos fairly show the residence of Curtis Wainwright as you saw it in July 12th of 2015?
Yes.
Moved to introduce states 33A and B.
No objection.
Show them admitted.
Permission to publish.
You may.
Let me start with 33B. What are we looking at in states 33B?
We're looking at Curtis Wright's residence from, if you're standing in the street, from the left-hand side looking at it.
And I am so bad with right and left. In the right-hand side center of the picture, there is a silver car. Did you later learn to whom that car, let me rephrase that. Did you later learn who was driving that car?
Yes.
And who was that?
Curtis Wainwright.
I'm going to show you what's in evidence is 33A, and if you could tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what we're seeing in 33A.
That is the rear of Curtis Wainwright's residence.
And I'm going to give you, did I give you the laser pointer?
You did.
If you would just show the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, because we can kind of see two residents, which one is Curtis Wainwright's residence that we're looking at in 33A?
Yes, it is the one to the right here.
So we're seeing a corner of it.
Yes, we're seeing a corner of it from the rear.
Is there a cell tower that can be seen from the Wright's residence?
Yes, it's visible in the video, in the photograph.
And would you, with the laser pointer, indicate where in that photograph that cell tower can be seen?
Yes, it is in the center of the photograph.
Thank you. Now, when the search warrant was being executed, you indicated you had members of law enforcement from Jefferson County. Was anyone particular assigned to assist you or to participate in the execution of this search warrant?
Yes, we were assigned, or Detective Nick Schuneman, who's a member of the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office, was assigned to us to assist us in our legal process.
And how did the collection process, when you were collecting anything from this search warrant, or we'll talk later about future search warrants, but how did that collection process work? Who took into, who bagged and tagged, if you will, an expression that we often hear, the evidence that was collected?
That would be Detective Nick Schuneman.
Now, did you go into the residence of Curtis Wainwright during the execution of the search warrant?
Yes.
So you saw what was inside the residence?
Yes.
Now, from the residence, I want to show you what has been marked for identification as States Exhibit 68 and States Exhibit 33E, both previously shown to Defense Counsel. Let me just sit them up here and then I'll come back and ask you a few questions. Was a cell phone seized from the residence of Curtis Wainwright?
Yes.
And referring to it, can you tell us what the state handed you, what's been marked for identification as States number 68, what that is?
Yes, Exhibit 68 is the cell phone recovered from Curtis Wright's residence.
And I also want you to look at States Exhibit 33E. What is States Exhibit 33E?
That is a photograph of the cell phone.
And the photo, is that how the cell phone appeared when it was found in Curtis Wainwright's residence?
Yes.
Move to introduce States Exhibit 33E and 68.
No objection.
Show them admitted.
Now, 33E, where was that phone found in the Wright's residence?
It was found in the master bedroom of the residence on a nightstand to the left of the bed.
Now, when we look at States Exhibit 68, is the phone all still in one piece?
It is not.
When the phone in 68 was actually seized from the residence, was it in one piece?
It was.
So this is not something that you or Detective Schooneman did to the phone?
No.
If I may publish, Your Honor.
You may.
And I'm going to also publish 33E, Your Honor. And using your laser pointer, can you show the ladies and gentlemen of the jury where the cell phone that is contained in States 68 was in this photo and the condition, therefore the condition it was in at the time it was seized?
Yes. The phone is right there sitting on the nightstand. And that depicts the way that it was taken into evidence at that time.
Thank you. Was a search warrant for that vehicle we saw in the vehicle in the front of Mr. Wright's residence, was a search warrant executed on that automobile?
Yes.
And when that search warrant was executed, was anything taken from the vehicle?
Yes.
What was taken from the vehicle?
Specifically a Garmin GPS unit.
I'm going to show you what's been marked for identification as States Exhibit 43 and was previously shown to Defense Counsel. What is States Exhibit 43?
It is a bag containing a black Garmin GPS device.
And is this the Garmin that was taken from the car that we saw outside of Curtis Wainwright's residence?
Yes.
Was that car in the driveway of his residence?
Yes, it was.
Move to introduce States Exhibit 43.
No objection.
Show it admitted.
Now, these items that were collected, the phone and the Garmin, were they sent someplace for processing?
Yes.
And where were they sent?
They were sent to the Lee County Sheriff's Office from Missouri.
Now, You talked a little bit ago about a neighborhood canvass that you did on Jarvis Street and the reasons for doing a neighborhood canvass. Did you also do a neighborhood canvass in the area that Mr. Wright lived?
Yeah.
And did you find anyone home?
There were several people home in some of the houses. Most of the houses were empty at that time.
So a number of the houses were empty, some of the houses had people in them.
Yes.
And were you able to gain any information? Did anyone talk with you?
No.
Did you find that unusual?
Not necessarily.
Relevance?
Overruled.
Going back to July 12th, were there other search warrants conducted in Missouri with law enforcement on July 12th, in addition to the search warrant we've talked about for Curtis Wainwright's residence?
Yes.
And where was that?
There were additional search warrants executed on Curtis Wainwright, the bodily search warrant on Curtis Wainwright, as well as Mr. Sievers' condo in Festus.
Let me show you what's been marked for identification as State's Exhibit. (56A), previously shown to Defense Counsel. Showing you what's been marked for identification as 56A. What is 56A?
Is a photograph of the building which contains the unit that is marked Sievers condominium.
And is this the condominium where the search warrant was executed on July 12th?
Yes.
Move to admit State's Exhibit 56A.
Objection.
We'll show it admitted.
Permission to publish?
You may.
Now, this is the outside of the condominium building?
Yes.
Is Mark Sievers' apartment in the entirety of that building, or is it one of the units within that building?
No, it's contained within the building.
Thank you. Was anything seized within that condo?
Yes.
And did you take those items seized and were they shipped to the Lee County Sheriff's Office?
Yes.
So we're still in July 12th. Did you continue to follow leads in Missouri after July 12th?
Yes, we did.
When did you, did you during the time you were out in Missouri that first time have an occasion to speak to a person called Jimmy Ray Rogers?
Yes, I did.
And what was your purpose in speaking with Jimmy Ray Rogers?
Being that Curtis Wainwright became a person of interest in the investigation, our primary focus at this point, and based on what we were doing, we were trying to get as much background as possible on him and get an idea of who he was, who he spoke to, things of that nature. In doing that, Jimmy Ray Rogers' name came up, so we went to go speak with him to see if we could obtain any further information.
How did his name come up? I mean, did Mr. Wright tell you about him, or was it something you found in a phone, or was it on a piece of paper? How did Mr. Rogers' name come up?
It was from his cell phone records.
And was Mr. Rogers a suspect at this time at all?
No.
Was he home when you initially went to his home?
He was not.
About how far was his home from Curtis Wainwright's residence?
I would say approximately a half hour to 45 minutes.
So if he wasn't home when you initially got there, but did you speak with anyone or did you wait for him? What happened?
No, my partner David Levitt and I responded to the residents. We were greeted by Taylor Showmaker, who we would later learn was his live-in girlfriend.
And did there come a time after you got there where Mr. Rogers arrived?
He showed up a short time after.
And did you have a brief conversation with him while you were there?
Yes.
Did you ask him any questions regarding Curtis Wainwright while you were at his residence?
Yes.
At that time, did he provide you any information to further your investigation?
Objection, Your Honor. Calls for hearsay.
Overruled.
No.
Now, I guess we're now moving forward in your visit out in Missouri. When did you return to Lee County?
Well, my trip started on the 9th, and I was there approximately 11 days. So, from the 10th. Apologize. From the 9th to when my trip ended was approximately 11 days. So, 11 days from then.
So you returned sometime like July 20th or July 21st?
Yes.
During the time out in Missouri, we've talked about a couple of search warrants, and we've talked about talking with going out to find Mr. Rogers. What else were you doing during that period of time? What else was going on in terms of this investigation? What were you doing?
Well, when we get back now, because
I'm
of the
talking about between July 10th when you got out to Missouri and July 20th or the 21st when you left. During that 11-day period of time, what type of things were you doing in Missouri?
again, we're continuing to follow up with witnesses, get background things of that nature, getting additional search warrants.
Did you talk to other people while you were out there besides those that we've spoken about?
Yes.
Did you end up looking into car rentals and car repairs while you were out there?
Yes.
Did you end up determining that there had been a rental car from the Enterprise that was out in that area?
Yes.
Now, you ended up saying that you came back July 20th or 21st. And when did you next go back to Missouri?
My next trip back out to Missouri was, I believe, August 23rd.
So between when you returned to Lee County in July and when you went back to Missouri in August, what was going on with the investigation?
In between that time, obviously because what was taken and sent back required processing, further review. We're going through phone records. The Garmin GPS is being processed. We were able to recover the white rental vehicle, which was a Hyundai Elantra, which we found in another state, and that had been brought back, and we're in the midst of processing that as well.
Was the digital forensic unit attempting to download the Garmin that had been seized from the car in Mr. Wright's driveway?
Yes.
And during that period of time, in July to August 24th, was that digital forensics unit able to actually download information from that Garmin?
Yes.
You indicated you were reviewing phone records. Was there any particular individual's phone records that you were reviewing during that period of time?
Yes, at that time we were in the process of reviewing Mr. Sievers' phone records as well as Curtis Wright's phone records.
You indicated that, let's talk about Mr. Sievers' phone records. Did you see anything in Mr. Sievers' phone records when you were reviewing them that came to your attention?
Yes.
What did you see?
Specifically, there appeared to be content in the text messages that would suggest, that showed that he was speaking with Curtis Wright and would suggest that they may be using another device to communicate.
Was there a particular day in those phone records that raised a flag to you?
Specifically in this instance would have been May 17th of 2015.
Because of the information you saw in Mark Sievers' cell phone for May 17th, did you make any requests? Did you ask that anything be done?
Yes.
And what did you ask be done?
We wanted to recover cell phone tower records for those specific dates.
Okay, for the May 17th, you
Yes.
talked about that. What was the other date that that it made you or led you to want to get cell phone tower records?
That would have been June 28th and June 29th.
So are those records around the time of the homicide?
Yes.
And where were you looking to get cell phone records around the time of the homicide, June 28th and 29th? Where? What tower?
It would be the towers closest to the incident location, closest to the crime scene.
So, so closest to Jarvis Road?
Yes.
And what location for May 17th were you looking for, or did you request, did you want cell phone tower records?
That would have been for in Hillsborough, Missouri.
And where in Hillsborough, Missouri were you particularly looking?
Specifically the tower closest to Curtis Wainwright's residence.
So when we were looking before at the photograph and we saw the tower behind or in front of, I think you said, Curtis Wainwright's residence, was that the particular tower you were seeking cell phone records from?
Visually looking at it, ideally, yes.
And again, why were you requesting those records? What were you hoping to glean from those?
Realistically, based on the content in both Mr. Sievers' cell phone and Mr. Wright's cell phone, if they were in fact communicating with another device, it's likely that through those tower dumps we would be able to identify potentially a number later in the investigation.
When you received the tower dumps and the information that was provided, did that become feasible to look through those records?
No, not initially.
So tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, when you received the records, what you realized.
Basically, once we received the tower records, there was an astronomical amount of data in the Florida tower dumps. I believe there was close to 100,000 numbers that had passed through the tower between the time frames that we requested, and Missouri was also tens of thousands. So the amount of data that we recovered was more than we initially thought we would.
How had you thought you were initially planning to look through all this data before you realized how much there was? What was your initial plan?
Basically to go through it by hand.
When all of this hundreds of thousand and more numbers came through, what conclusion did you reach?
At that point, based on the amount of information that we have, it was almost not almost not feasibly able to interpret that data.
So, did you, well, let's come back to that in a moment. Or let's move. Ultimately, did you end up requesting certain software for the Lee County Sheriff's Office so that this data could be reviewed?
Yes.
And what software did you end up requesting so that it would be possible to view this enormous amount of data?
It's a program called Cellhawk.
Now, you indicated that you went back to Missouri, maybe August 23rd or so. When you went back to Missouri, what was the purpose in going back to Missouri?
In review of the evidence that we had recovered from our initial trip, specifically in this case the Garmin GPS unit, it came to our attention that the unit had synced with a device, an email address, which we were later able to determine was jimmyrayrogers90@gmail.com.
And with that information, that the Garmin had synced to an email address jimmyrayRogers90@gmail.com. What did you do?
Once we found that information, it became apparent that Mr. Rogers was involved more than we initially thought. So our next step was to go back to Missouri and try to follow up and obtain search warrants for his residence.
And did you obtain a search warrant for his residence?
Yes.
And let me show you what's been marked for identification as 35A and B and previously shown to defense counsel. What are states 35A and B?
Exhibit 35A is a photograph of the front of Mr. Rogers' residence. Exhibit 35B is a photograph of the rear of Mr. Rogers' residence.
I moved to introduce states exhibit 35A and B.
No objection.
Show them admitted.
Would you like this?
Permission to just publish, Your Honor. I'll just publish one of them.
You may publish.
So when we're talking about states 35A, what did you tell us states 35A was?
That is a photograph depicting the front of Mr. Rogers' residence.
And is this where the search warrant, where you had a search warrant, received a search warrant?
Yes.
And is this the residence in which the search warrant was executed?
Yes.
What county was Mr. Rogers' residence in?
In Washington County.
And can you walk us through how that search warrant was executed in, or for Mr. Rogers' residence? Just walk us through the process.
Yes, basically we obtained a search warrant for the residence. Upon securing the search warrant, we responded to the residence, knocked on the door. We were met by Ms. Showmaker. We told her that we had a search warrant for the residence, and she acknowledged it, and then we started processing the residence.
Now, how do you process a residence? I mean, how does that work?
Initially, and especially in this case, my partner, David Lebed, and I briefed with Detective Schoeneman, which basically resulted in us just giving him a brief rundown about what we could potentially be looking for, and then he would start his processing, which usually consists of photographs, video, and evidence collection.
So about what time was this search warrant executed?
Approximately in or around 2:30.
And did Ms. Showmaker remain in the residence during the processing of the search warrant?
No, she didn't.
So what was your role in the execution of the search warrant?
Initially, obviously, to brief Detective Schoeneman, look for specific evidence that I was looking for at that time, and scene security.
Did you end up staying outside of the residence for part of the processing of the search warrant?
Yes.
And what did you do when you sat outside the residence for part of the processing of the search warrant?
I spoke with Ms. Showmaker. I spoke with my partner at one point, other people on scene.
So Ms. Taylor was outside the residence?
Yes.
Where was she outside the residence?
She was sitting on the, I guess, sitting in the front of the yard, like in the front of the yard by the walkway leading to the residence.
Your Honor, can you give me just a moment?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry, Detective Downs. So you indicated she was sitting outside the residence. Is that correct?
Yes.
And was she sitting outside with anybody?
At that time, it was with myself and Jefferson County Sheriff's Office member Sean Cope. He was in close proximity to us. Cope.
Was Mr. Rogers there during the execution of the search warrant?
He was not.
And you indicated you were sitting outside, Ms. Showmaker was outside. Did she have any children with her?
She did.
And were the children sitting with her?
Yes.
What was she doing with the children?
Just basically, for lack of better terminology, corralling them and just basically just motherly duties.
Did she have any food with her for the children?
I believe so.
While the search warrant was being executed, while that was going on inside the residence, did you end up having a conversation with Ms. Taylor? Did she end up speaking to you about potential evidence that you might be able to locate?
Yes.
So how did that come about? Can you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury how that came about?
Objection, hearsay.
Overruled.
Just for clarification, you're asking how our conversation came about, or what transpired after?
I'm asking how you started to talk with her.
Oh, okay, that's fine. Yeah, basically, we had met prior, as stated, and obviously now we're on scene together. We spent a little time in each other's presence, and I'm explaining to her, like I do in most situations, you know, we're here looking for evidence. We're here for a reason, and it would be better now if you have involvement. If we don't want to find out later that you are involved in this. It's better if you know something to let us know now.
And after you said that to her, did she provide you information about where you could locate some evidence?
She did.
Objection, hearsay.
Overruled.
And what did she tell you?
Initially, and again, once she wanted to speak with us, I explained again, we're looking for evidence. Is there anything that we should be looking for? And she did point out 2 specific items, or 4 specific items, and later took me to another location where I recovered further evidence.
So what items did she point out to you? What did she say to you in terms of what items you were going to go look for?
The information was kind of intermittent at that time, but she specifically noted a plaque hanging in her kitchen. She confirmed one item that I knew that I was looking for that I found, a Budweiser t-shirt, a white cooler, and black backpack.
Well, let me start with those items. Let's see. State's exhibits, what's been marked for identification is 39, 40, 50, and 52. All have been previously shown to defense counsel. Hand you State's Exhibit number 39. What is State's Exhibit number 39?
Exhibit 39 is a red Budweiser t-shirt.
Now, you indicate this was something that you were specifically looking for. Was this, if you could open State's Exhibit number 39, look at it.
Excuse me one moment. Do you want me to take it out or just look at it?
Right now, I just want you to look at it.
Okay.
And then I'm going to have you take it out. So,
All right, gloves on.
might as well have you put the gloves on.
Sorry about that.
What is State's Exhibit number 39?
It is a red Budweiser T-shirt.
Were you was this an item that you were specifically looking for in the Rogers residence?
Yes.
And was this item taken from the Rogers residence?
Yes, it was.
Move to introduce State's Exhibit number 39.
No objection.
Showed admitted.
Permission to publish.
You may publish.
You would just take it out of the bag and hold it.
I just want to get in a position where I can see it.
If you would just take it out of the bag and hold it up for the ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Thank you.
Sure. Good.
I'm going to next hand you State's, with the marked identification of State's Exhibit number 40 and previously shown to defense counsel.
Okay.
And ask if you can tell me what is in State's Exhibit number 40.
Yes, it is a plastic vinyl cooler.
And where was that plastic vinyl cooler found or taken from?
Minivan parked outside of Mr. Rogers' residence.
And was that taken during the execution of the search warrant?
Yes.
And did you look inside to check?
No, I will for you. Yes, that is the cooler.
Move to introduce State's Exhibit number 40.
No objection.
Showed admitted.
If you could just, standing there, just kind of remove the paper and just hold it up from where you're standing and show it to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Thank you. I'm going to show you with the previously marked as State's Exhibit number 50, previously shown to defense counsel. State's Exhibit number 50, what is that?
This is a black plaque or hanging sign.
Now, you indicated a few minutes ago that Ms. Taylor told you something about a plaque or a hanging sign. Is that what we see is that contained in State's Exhibit number 50? If you would look.
Yes.
Move to introduce State's Exhibit number 50.
No objection.
Showed admitted.
Permission to publish, Your
You
Honor.
may publish.
Can you just hold it up for the members of the jury?
My apologies.
Thank you. You also
Can we stop for a moment? We've had an indication from our jurors to put the shades down a little bit.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Every time. something about a black backpack. She told you something about a black backpack, is that correct?
Yes.
Where was that black backpack located?
In the back of another vehicle adjacent to the minivan.
Was that other vehicle adjacent to the minivan there when you got there?
It was not.
How did it get there? Could you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury how that particular, was it a car?
It was a vehicle. It was, I believe it was a Kia.
How that particular Kia got to be beside that van?
Yes. Initially, when we served the search warrant, only Miss Showmaker was home. During the process of executing the search warrant, it came to our attention that Mr. Rogers was spotted closer to the scene, and it appeared that he was coming back to the scene. At that time, units that were with us broke off to intercept him. They came into contact with him there. Later, he would request that the vehicle be given back to Miss Showmaker. The vehicle was manual, I believe, and there was an issue. She could drive a manual transmission or stick shift, but was a little bit iffy with it. So Ms. Showmaker and myself responded. She drove the vehicle back to the scene with me. I was there specifically just in the event that she was unable to drive the vehicle.
How did you get to the car?
We were given a ride by a member of the Washington County Sheriff's Office.
So now, going back to that car that got back to the scene that Ms. Showmaker drove back to the residence, I want to show you what's been marked for identification as State's Exhibit 52 and previously shown to Defense Counsel. What is State's Exhibit 52?
It is a black backpack.
Now, is this the backpack that you talked about taking from that Kia when it came back as part of the search warrant?
Yes.
Move to introduce State's Exhibit number 52.
No objection.
Showed admitted.
Permission to publish.
You may publish.
You would just stand right there and hold it up so the members of the jury can see it
Would you like me to remove it?
from the bag?
Yes.
Yes, just so they can see. Do you need scissors?
No, I think it's open already.
Does that backpack have a name on the front of it?
It does.
What's the name on the front of it?
It says the North Face.
The North Face? Okay, thank you. Now, there were other items that were taken from Mr. Rogers' residence, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm going to show you what's been marked for identification as State's Exhibit 41 and 42, both previously shown to Defense Counsel. And ask if you can identify, let's start with, well, we'll just do them numerically. Let's start with 41 first.
Exhibit 41 is a white wicking T-shirt.
And where was that seized during the execution of the search warrant?
In Jimmy Ray Rogers' closet.
Move to introduce State's Exhibit 41.
No objection.
Showed admitted.
I'm not going to ask you to publish it at this time. And State's Exhibit 42, what is State's Exhibit 42?
Exhibit 42 is our black, white, and green tennis shoes.
And were those shoes seized from the residence of Jimmy Ray Rogers?
Yes.
Move to introduce State's Exhibit number 42.
No objection.
Show it admitted.
Thank you. Now, what, all of these items that we have, and let me take some of those away from being in front of you. All of these items to which you have referred, are these, what happened with these items? Where did you send them?
After they were packaged by Detective Schoeneman, he signed them over to me, and then I sent them back to the Lee County Sheriff's Office.
Now, did there come a time when Ms. Showmaker, during the execution of that search warrant, provided you information that led you to take a car ride with her on a rural road?
Yes.
What did she tell you?
She stated that at one point,
Objection hearsay.
Sustained.
So what item did she indicate she might be able to take you to?
it was a blue suit, like a jumpsuit.
And was she able to provide you directions for how to get there?
Yes.
And when did you go with her to look for this blue suit?
Pretty much a short time after speaking with her during the execution of the search warrant at Mr. Rogers' residence.
And where did she take you? What area?
It was a rural area, but it was approximately a half a mile east of Cadet Road on Highway 47.
I have no idea where a half a mile east of Cadet Road on 47 is. Can you give me a general sense and give the ladies and gentlemen a general sense of where that would be in relation to the residence of Ms. Showmaker and Mr. Rogers?
Yes, it's approximately a half hour away from Mr. Rogers' residence.
I'm going to show you what's been marked for identification as States Exhibits 37A, 37B, 37C, and 37D. You can look at these and then tell me what they are.
Yes. Exhibit 37A is a distance picture of where the suit was located. (37B) is another distanced photograph from the other side of where the suit was located. Exhibit 37C is a photograph, closer photograph of where the suit was located, approaching from the road in. Exhibit 37D is a close-up photograph of where the suit was located, facing from the wood line out to the roadway.
Move to introduce States Exhibits 37A through D.
No objection.
Show them admitted.
Permission to publish, Your Honor.
You may publish.
And Lieutenant Downs, I would like you to use the laser pointer during some of this, please. I'm showing you right now what has been introduced into evidence as States Exhibit 37A. Tell us where we are and what we are looking at, please.
Yes, this is Highway 47 East. The blue suit is right there, and I'm taking the photograph looking at the blue suit, which is on the right side of the road.
Now, you said that it was about, did you say a half mile from Cadet Road?
Approximately a half mile from that intersection was the only reference point.
Cadet Road, in the distances we're looking, or closer where I'm standing? In which direction is Cadet Road?
I believe it to be, it would be in back of me at this point.
Now, let me show you what's been introduced into evidence as 37B. What are we looking at in 37B?
This is just another distanced photograph of me looking from the other direction, and the blue suit is right there.
Can you again highlight where the blue suit is?
Yes, I'm sorry. It is right about there.
We see a person in the distance. Who do we see? At least I think I see a car and a person in the distance. What am I looking at?
You're looking at a vehicle belonging to the Washington County Sheriff's Office. And then there is a figure there, and I believe that is Taylor Showmaker.
Now, you indicated in terms of 37A, or this one, that it was the other direction. When you took, let me just show you 37A. When you took 37A, were you standing near that vehicle we see in 37B?
Yes, I think it's behind me in this photo.
All right, so then 37B is from the other direction. Is that what you meant when you said that?
Yes.
I want to show you 37C. Tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what they're seeing.
This is another photograph that I took of the suit. At this would be to the right. The open roadway would be to the left, and this is me walking in from the roadway.
And finally, I'm going to show you 37D. What is it?
37D is a close-up photograph of the suit. Just for reference, the vehicle would be to the left, open roadway would be to the right, going out to the roadway.
Now, I see, I don't know if it's straw or grass on top of that suit. Is that how it was when you initially saw it?
Yes.
Thank you. Was there a little bridge on the road anywhere close to where you found this suit?
Yes, it was close by.
And where was that bridge? I should have left the photos up. Where was that bridge in terms of the suit? Can you give us a sense?
I would say within approximately 50 yards, maybe less, of the suit.
Did you collect that suit that day?
Yes.
I want to show you what has been marked for identification as State's Exhibit 51. Previously shown to Defense Counsel. Show you State's Exhibit 51.
Thank you.
Could you tell us what State's Exhibit 51 is?
Yes, it is a pair of blue-colored overalls. Oops, I apologize. Yes, it's the overalls that I found on the side of the road.
And these are the overalls we saw in the photographs that we were just viewing.
Yes, ma'am.
Move to introduce State's Exhibit 51.
No objection.
Showed admitted.
Permission to publish.
You may publish.
If you would take it out, and then, Your Honor, once the suit is removed, I ask if Detective Downs can actually step down and stand in front of the jury with the suit.
He may.
Thank you.
Would you like me to step down?
Actually, it's kind of has stuff that falls off of it.
Yeah.
Your Honor, if you might step down, but I'll hold the box so that a lot of it can stay in the box.
Okay.
Thank you, Your Honor.
record, he's holding up two separate pieces, and you said there's one more piece when he pulled out a second smaller section.
Now, when you pulled out the first piece, did we see snaps on it?
This piece? Yes.
Can you just hold them up enough so the jury can see the snaps? And we see blue, light blue kind of fabric hanging out of parts. What is that?
This is the pocket.
Thank you. Okay. After collecting the, what states Exhibit 51, the blue jumpsuit on the side of the road, where did you go with Ms. Showmaker after that?
After collecting the suit, we responded to the Washington County Sheriff's Office, where I later obtained a recorded statement from her.
How far was where you collected the suit from the Washington County Sheriff's Office?
It's approximately 30 minutes.
Let me just go back to collecting the suit. Was it difficult for Ms. Showmaker to direct you to where this suit was?
No, she had a pretty good idea of where it had been discarded.
Would you say she got you there pretty straightforward?
Yes.
Now, after she gave a statement, where did Ms. Showmaker go?
After we concluded our statement, she went home.
How'd she get home?
She was provided a ride.
Did you end up speaking with her the next day?
Yes.
But let me go back to that night. Did she give you any information that night about possible cell phone parts?
She did during my statement with her.
And did you go looking for those the next day, or did you go looking for those?
Yes.
And did you end up finding any cell phone parts?
Yes.
Where did you go looking for them?
She directed us to the Doe Run facility, which is in another town over from Cadet. It's approximately within 45 minutes of an hour, just for reference, from Mr. Rogers' residence. And it was later determined to be Mr. Rogers' place of employment.
And I want to show you what's been marked for identification as 38A and B and was previously shown to defense counsel. Let me hand you 38A and B. If you could take a look and tell me what we see in 38A and B.
I'm going to have to remove them fully. Is that okay?
Yes.
I should probably keep these on, I guess, right? Exhibit 38B is the faceplate to AT&T cell phone.
Is that something you found? I haven't.
Oops, my
Not
apologies.
yet. So 38A, why don't you look at 38A as well? You've looked at 38B, look at 38A, tell us what they are.
Yes, Exhibit 38A is the backplate to an Alcatel phone case.
I'm sorry, to
Alcatel?
a Alcatel? Thank you.
And were these found on the side of the road? Or found, where were these found? Let me just start with where were these found?
They were found on the side of the road.
And I think you said, did you say about a half mile from the Doe Run? What did you say?
Within about a mile from the actual Doe Run facility itself.
And did you collect those?
Yes.
Move to introduce State's Exhibit number 38A and B.
No objection.
We'll show them admitted.
Permission to publish, if you would just,
You may publish.
thank you, Your Honor, if you would just hold them up for the jury, please. Now, when we were looking at the photographs on the side of the road a little while, where you collected the blue suit, it was very grassy and rural. These particular cell phone parts, were they found in a similar rural area or grassy area?
Yes.
Were there any homes around or any shopping centers?
No, not for miles in this instance.
And how did you know to go look where you looked?
We were brought there by Taylor Showmaker.
Did you ultimately, while you were out on this trip, actually go to the Doe Run facility?
Yes.
And that's the facility you were talking about that was a mile or so from where you found the phone parts?
Yes.
I'm going to show you what's been marked for identification as State's Exhibit 36A. It's previously been shown to defense counsel. What is 36A?
This is a photograph depicting the facility itself.
When we say the facility itself, what facility are we talking about?
The Doe Run facility.
And is that how it appeared back in August of 2015?
Yes.
Move to introduce.
No objection.
We'll show it admitted.
Permission to publish State's Exhibit 36A.
You may.
What are we looking at in 36A?
Again, we were looking at a photograph of the Doe Run facility.
Now, did you go inside this facility?
Yes.
Was there any particular area that you went inside for the facility?
Yes, looking at the picture, it would be on to the building to the left. I'll use the pointer.
Would you use the laser? Thank you.
It would have been this building.
Thank you very much. Before you take off, did you take off one?
Yep.
When you take off your gloves, do you take your gloves off in a particular fashion?
Yes.
How do you take your gloves off when you're taking those gloves off?
Uh,
Can you raise your hands up? How do you take your gloves off when you're taking them off?
Sure. Would you like me to just take them off so I
Yes.
can visually? Basically, well, when we go to our classes and things of that nature, and through my experience, if you contaminate the outside of the glove, you would take the other contaminated glove, scoop underneath to not contaminate, house this glove, and then turn the other one inside out.
And is that something that you're trained to do in order to avoid contamination?
Yes, it's a common practice.
So you went to the Doe Run facility. Did you speak with Mr. Conway while you were at the facility?
Yes.
Who was Mr. Conway?
Mr. Conway was Jimmy Rogers, direct supervisor.
And while you were there, did Mr. Conway show you his Mr. Conway show you his cell phone, that being Mr. Conway's cell phone?
Yes.
And did you end up taking some photographs of what Mr. Conway was showing you on his cell phone?
Yes.
I want to show you what's been marked for identification as 47 A, B, and C. Are these the photographs you took of what Mr. Conway showed you?
Yes, they are.
Did you also request from Mr. Conway any particular items from him?
Yes, I did. In speaking with him and leading into the messages on his phone, I also inquired as to if he would provide a sample of the type of suits that they wear at the facility, as well as the latex gloves that they use.
And was he willing to provide those to you?
He did.
And did you take those with you when you left?
Yes.
I want to show you what's been marked for identification as State's Exhibit number 44. And ask if you can identify it.
Yes, they're two pairs of blue covered coveralls and a open box of latex gloves.
And are these the coveralls and the gloves that Mr. Conway gave to you as samples for what they use at the Doe Run facility?
Yes.
Move to introduce State's Exhibit number 44.
No objection, Your Honor.
Show it admitted.
Permission to publish.
You may publish.
If you could open those and show the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what's contained within State's Exhibit 44. So it looks like you took a paper bag out of the box that we were looking at, is that correct?
Yes, I'm sorry, would you like
No,
me
no,
to-
no, and now you're removing something from the paper bag.
Yeah.
Are those two different types of overalls that Mr. Conway provided you?
Yes.
Was there anything else he provided you?
Yes.
And what are those that he provided you?
It is an open box of blue latex gloves.
Is that what he gave you when you asked him for the gloves that they distribute?
Yes.
Could you take out one and show it to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury? In fact, are these all clean gloves?
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, permission to publish one of the gloves to the jury by having it passed around the jury.
Okay.
And then additionally,
Were these other gloves that were given to you by Mr. Conway?
yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you see the bottom of the pants again?
Yes. Would you like to see both?
Yes, please.
Your Honor, might I ask if Lieutenant Downs stepped down and actually
You can
stepped in
step down
front
and
of the
get-
jury?
Step down and get closer so they can get a better look and hold it up.
Do it one at a time. Detective Levitt, I guess it goes without saying you returned those, or you sent those sample coveralls, gloves, back to the Lee County Sheriff's Office as well.
Yes, ma'am.
When did you return to the Lee County Sheriff's Office from Missouri during that or at the end of that August trip?
Somewhere around the 29th is approximately a 6-day trip.
When was your next trip to Missouri?
After August, my next trip to Missouri would have been in September of 2015.
And then your next trip after that?
Would have been October 2015.
Now, during August and September, but let's take from the 29th, during that period of time that we're talking about, what was going on at the Lee County Sheriff's Office in terms of this investigation?
It was furtherance of looking at technological data that we recovered, further evidence that we seized, testing physical evidence, things of that nature.
When you return, what was your purpose in returning to Missouri in October?
In October, I believe it was for the purpose of retrieving Mr. Wright.
So when you say retrieving, do you mean transporting and bringing him back to Lee County, Florida?
Yes, we transported him from Missouri back to Lee County.
And how did you transport him back? I mean, by airplane, by car?
We drove.
And when you say we, who drove?
My partner, David Lebb, and I.
And during that trip back, did Mr. Wright say anything to you about this case at all?
No.
Were you able during that trip to take note of the mileage from Missouri in that area to Lee County?
Yes.
And what was that mileage?
It's in excess of 1,100 miles.
Now, you indicated a little earlier you've gotten all this cell tower information, and there were over 100,000 or 100,000 numbers for Jarvis Road, and you ended up requesting some software. Did there come a time when you actually made a request of analysts at the Lee County Sheriff's Office in terms of using that software and looking for certain information?
Yes.
And what requests did you make? And when?
Yeah, this is probably January of 2016. I requested that analyst Myra Simmons start looking into the phone records and tower dumps that we had recovered throughout the investigation.
Did you give her any guidance? Did you tell her what you wanted her to look for?
Yes, we were looking for specific numbers in this particular instance from different area codes.
So you say different area codes. Were there certain area codes that you asked her to see if she could find?
Yes, we were looking for a Georgia area code and a California area code.
Why did you ask her to look for a Georgia area code and a California area? Let's start with one. Why did you ask her to look for a Georgia area code?
In speaking with Mr. Wright, he had given us information that potentially a burner phone or prepaid phone that he had used to communicate with Mr. Sievers was could have possibly been a Georgia number.
And you indicated California. Why did you ask her, Myra Simmons, to look for a possible California area code number?
In that situation, it was just the farthest away and the largest state likely to have multiple area codes.
And did Ms. Simmons ultimately provide you information with the results that she obtained looking for those area codes?
Yes.
With that information, did you request cell phone records for a 404 number?
Yes.
I want to show you what has been marked for evidence as State's Exhibit number 76. And Madam Clerk, I apologize, I think I don't have 70, maybe, no, I don't have 76 out here. And while Madam Clerk is looking for that, let me ask you about what has been pre-marked as States Exhibit 79, and then I'm going to ask about 67. So I think there's 3 here that I may not have asked Madam Clerk for. But let me, so you requested records for a 404 number. Were records also requested for you indicated there were both area codes, numbers were found for both area codes, correct?
Yes,
And one of those was a 404 area code?
yes,
And the other number, did that have an 858 area code?
yes,
And were records also requested for that 858 number?
yes.
And once those records had been received, specifically for the 858 number, did that lead you to request additional information for the 858 number?
Yes.
And what did it lead you to request in terms of the 858 number?
We were looking for subscriber information.
Yeah, Madam Clerk was very efficient, and they were all here. They were right in front of my nose, and I missed them. Let me show you what's been marked as States Exhibit number 76, previously shown to Defense Counsel. States Exhibit number 76, the 404, records for the 404 number you requested.
Yes.
Move to introduce States Exhibit 76. It's a self-authenticating document, Your Honor.
Your Honor, I renew all prior objections to the business records.
Noted for the record preserved, will show 76 admitted.
Is States Exhibit I'm going to show you what's it's right here. It's a snake. I read my notes. I'm going to show you, maybe I'm not. Madam Clerk, did you give me States Exhibit 79?
I don't know about that, I can look at that.
And while Madam Clerk is looking at that, after you receive, she's quick. Thank you. I'm going to show you what has been marked for identification as States Exhibit 79. This one was not previously shown to Defense Counsel, so I'm showing Defense Counsel right now. Are these the records that were obtained for the 858 area code number?
Yes.
Move to introduce States Exhibit number 79 with its business record certification.
Your Honor, I renew all prior objections to the business record certification.
Noted for the record, will show it admitted.
I want to show you now what's been marked for identification as States Exhibit 67 and previously shown to Defense Counsel. Are these the track phone records that you requested?
Yes, they are.
Move to introduce State's Exhibit number 67. At this time.
Just look at it one more time.
Absolutely.
Yes, sir.
Sure, can we approach?
Sure.
You indicated that this information was developed from tower records that were obtained for Chapel Hill Court in Missouri. Well, let me start with the Chapel Hill Court in Missouri. I want to show you, I have too many things in my hand. I want to show you what's been marked for identification as State's Exhibit number 81, which is the tower records for the Chapel Hill Court Tower. These are the records that were used for the tower, these are records received for the Chapel Hill Tower tower dump.
Yes, they are.
Move to introduce with the business record certification, Your Honor.
And Your Honor, for purposes of preserving the record, I renew all prior business record certifications.
Showed admitted.
Objections.
That's State's Exhibit 81. In the hand you State's Exhibit number, what's been marked for identification as State's Exhibit number 82. Are these the tower records that were obtained for the tower closest to 27034 Jarvis Road?
Yes, they are.
Move to introduce State's Exhibit number 82.
And Your Honor, I renew all prior objections.
Noted for the record, we'll show it admitted.
I want to show you what's been marked for identification as State's Exhibit number 90A and previously shown to Defense Counsel.
I'm sorry, was that 90A or 98?
90, A is in apple,
Thank
or alpha. But 90A. You indicated that while you were out in Missouri on the first trip, that you all obtained information from the Enterprise rental out there.
Yes.
From the Enterprise rental. And were records sought and obtained, were certified records sought and obtained from Enterprise regarding that particular car?
Yes.
I want to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 90A and 90B. Are these the records that were obtained?
Yes, it is.
Move to introduce State's Exhibit number 90, 90A and B.
Again,
Pursuant to a business, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Pursuant to a business record certification.
again, Your Honor, I renew all prior objections.
Noted for the record, we'll show 90A and B admitted.
Thank you, Your Honor. During the course of this investigation, were bank records sought from the Bank of America for the account of Curtis Wainwright?
Yes,
And did you have occasion to review those records?
yes,
And did you find certain checks within those records that had been made payable to Curtis Wainwright from the Teresa Sievers MD MS account?
yes.
I want to show you what's already been introduced into evidence as 60B. Is that one of these checks?
Yes, it is.
And when was that check? What's the date that's written on that check?
The date on the check is June 9th of 2015.
And does the record indicate when the check was cashed?
Yes, it does.
And did you also find other checks within those records?
Yes, I did.
Let me go back in July of 2015. Let me go back to July of 2015. Did there come a time when you went to the Sievers home and saw Mr. Sievers there?
Yes.
And what was I want to talk about it around July 24th. What was the purpose of the trip to the Sievers home?
We had obtained search warrants for the family's 3 pets, and I responded to execute the warrant.
Now, search warrants for the pets. What were the search warrants for?
The specific search warrant was to take hair specimens from the 3 pets, being that we had recovered the rental vehicle we believe they used to drive down here. When I say they, I mean Curtis Wright and Jimmy Rogers. We thought that possibly from being in the house there could have been some kind of transfer of pet dander that we would later recover from the vehicle to make a further link.
And was Mr. Sievers home at that time?
Upon initial arrival, he was not. He showed up a very short time later.
Do you see Mark Sievers in the courtroom?
Yes, I do.
If you would identify him by an item of clothing and pointing to him, please.
He is the bald gentleman in the glasses wearing a striped tie.
If the
Apologize.
record would reflect that the lieutenant has identified Mark Sievers.
Let the record so reflect.
Now, you've indicated to us that you spoke with Taylor Showmaker in July, I guess July 19th or 18th or 19th, on your first trip out to Missouri.
Yes, ma'am, July 18th.
And you spoke with her again in August of 2015, what, the 23rd, 4th, 5th?
25th.
The 25th, was that during the execution of the search warrant?
Yes.
And also that you took a statement from her, I think you said that night?
Yes.
Did there come a time in 2016 when you received a phone call from Taylor Showmaker?
Yes.
And was that in January or February? Do you recall when you received that phone call?
I believe it was late January of 2016, if not very early February.
And what was the purpose of that phone call?
She had contacted me and basically said that due to the circumstances surrounding all the events that transpired, basically everything that was going on with the case, she was in fear and was having lodging issues.
And what did she ask something of you?
Yes.
What did she ask?
She asked if there was any assistance that we could provide her to improve her situation.
What did you say to her?
I told her I did not know and that I would have to run it up my chain of command and see if there was even anything that we could do for her.
Ultimately, was there anything that you could do for her?
Yes.
And what was that?
We were able to identify a witness assistance program through the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. We got approval through the chain of command, and she was able to receive assistance from that.
And do you know how much assistance she receives? Received or receives?
Yes. Initially, in I believe it to be February 25th of 2016, she received a $1,000 payment to cover first and last for new lodging. And then from then on to present, she receives monthly distributions of $400.
Is there any requirement with that $400 a month distribution that she testify in court?
No.
You know, we were just talking about those just a minute ago, those couple of checks or we were talking specifically about that one check that was written June 9th of 2015. Were those on the medical practice of Teresa Sievers, the account of the medical practice?
Yes, they were.
Your Honor, would you give me just one moment, please?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Your Honor. Detective Downs, had Taylor Showmaker made any request to you for funds back in July of 2015?
No.
In August of 2015?
No.
September, October, November, or December of 2015?
No.
Had she ever asked for any money before she told you what she knew about Jimmy Ray Rogers?
No.
She asked for any money before she took you to where you found the blue jumpsuit on the side of the road?
No.
Any money before you found the cell phone parts?
No.
Any money before she made any statements to you?
No.
The state tenders the witness, Your Honor.
Defense.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Do you know if Ms. Shoemaker, do you know if she was working?
I don't believe she was.
Okay. And do you recall when Jimmy Ray Rogers was arrested?
Yes.
When was that?
This was August 25th of 2015.
Okay. And if Ms. Shoemaker was not working, and Mr. Rogers, do you know if he was still living with her up until he was arrested?
Yes, it is my understanding that they were living at the same residence.
Okay. In that, what was she going to do for money?
Objection calls for speculation.
Sustained.
Well, you said that she was in fear, is that correct? Do you recall saying that, she was in fear?
Yes,
Shoemaker?
yes.
Okay. She never actually changed addresses, did she?
I don't know.
You said she was having lodging issues, is that correct?
Yes.
If she was not a witness in this case, she would have been automatically excluded to receive any funds, correct?
I'm sorry, just one more time.
If she was not a witness in this case, she would have been automatically excluded to receive any funds, correct?
That is accurate.
Okay. How many other witnesses, to your knowledge, in this case, received money?
None to my knowledge.
So I want to back up. Let's go back to July 12th, 2015. You executed a search warrant upon the condominium of Mark Sievers in Festus, Missouri. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Was evidence collected?
Yes.
Was evidence processed?
Yes.
Was any of that evidence offered up here today?
No.
Okay. Is there a reason why we didn't get to see any of the evidence collected from Mr. Sievers' apartment here in court today?
Objection, Your Honor. Objection, Your Honor. It's outside the scope of this witness's knowledge or understanding.
Sustained.
What'd you collect from Mr. Sievers' apartment?
Photographic documentation, paperwork, things of that nature.
Okay. Did any of the information that you collected from Mr. Sievers' apartment, was any of that useful in your investigation?
I would say so, yes.
Okay, specifically what?
Specifically confirming that he did in fact have a condominium in Missouri.
Well, let me stop you there.
Okay.
Your Honor, I'm going to object. The counsel asked the witness for a question for what was significant, and as the witness began to answer, it stopped him in the middle of the answer.
Well, State can follow up on that on redirect, however, you do need to let the witness finish their answers.
I'm sorry, sir. Please finish your thought.
I'm sorry, just repeat the question so I'm clear.
I asked, what was the usefulness of the search warrant? And you began saying that it confirmed that he had a condominium in Missouri. Do you recall that?
Yes, it confirmed that he did in fact have a condominium,
Okay.
which information that we received in the investigation is more specific to our timeline, and him speaking to Mr. Wright would show that he did in fact come to visit Mr. Wright around the time of his wedding. So,
Just so I understand, you did the search warrant first, is that correct?
yes,
And so you said that the search warrant was useful because it lets you know that he had a condominium, is that correct?
Yes.
So when you executed the search warrant, did you know whose condominium it was?
Yes, we did at the time.
Okay. And you can find out whose real property someone owns by a myriad of ways, is that correct?
That's true.
Okay. So is it fair to say that at the time of the search warrant, you already knew that the real property being searched belonged to Mark Sievers?
That is true.
Okay, so what else did you get from that search?
There was documentation, plane ticket, things of that nature.
Okay. When you did the search, at that time, are you saying that you didn't already know that Mr. Sievers had come up for Mr. Wright's wedding?
I'm sorry, one more time.
When you did the search, July 12th, 2015, when you did the search, are you saying that at that time you didn't already know that Mr. Sievers had gone to Mr. Wright's wedding?
I don't believe we knew at that particular time.
Okay. You had a cell phone, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And his cell phone contained correspondence with Mr. Wright confirming that he went to the wedding, is that correct?
I believe so, yes.
And you had that as early as June 29th or June 30th, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so as of that date, you would have known that Mr. Sievers went to Mr. Wright's wedding, correct?
Objection
It's-
argumentative.
Overruled.
It's possible. I would have to review the search warrant. It's possible my timeline is off.
Okay. You said that as of June 12th, that Curtis Wright was a person of interest, is that correct?
Yes.
In fact, he was a suspect then.
Yes.
You executed the search warrant upon the residence of Mr. Curtis Wainwright, is that correct?
Yes.
And that is where you recovered Mr. Wright's cell phone, is that correct?
Yes.
When you recovered his cell phone, you said you were there with Mr. Schooneman, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and it was Mr. Schooneman's job to actually collect and package the evidence, is that correct?
Yes.
And is that because when you're in a different jurisdiction, you don't have legal authority to take evidence and collect evidence, is that correct?
That I'm not sure of. Him being with us in jurisdictions also because he's also a certified law enforcement in lieu of being a crime scene technician.
Okay. In addition to Mr. Wright's cell phone, what other items did you take out of Mr. Wright's apartment or trailer?
We took numerous items.
Did you take computers?
Yes.
Take wireless devices, tablets, things like that?
Yes.
You took a multitude of cell phones, correct?
Yes.
And were you able to turn those over to evidence and have those processed?
Yes.
I want to go now. You said, let's talk about the four items, the plaque in the kitchen, the Budweiser T-shirt, the cooler, and the black backpack, okay?
Okay.
All right, let's start with the plaque in the kitchen. What is the significance of the plaque in the kitchen in this case?
Basically, it verifies that Mr. Rogers purchased it for Miss Shoemaker from his trip from Florida.
Okay, and how did you verify that?
Did I verify?
How did you verify that this plaque was the same one that was purchased by Mr. Rogers?
Through Taylor Shoemaker.
Okay, So you relied upon Ms. Showmaker to confirm that that plaque was in fact purchased in a Florida Walmart by Mr. Wright, or Rogers. Is that correct?
No, that's not accurate.
Okay, how did you confirm that it was purchased by?
Per her statement, Mr. Rogers, when he got back from his trip, brought that for her as a present.
Okay. The Budweiser T-shirt, what's the significance of the Budweiser T-shirt?
It resembles an item that was bought in a Walmart in Lee County off of 6 Mile Cypress, where we have Curtis Wainwright and Jimmy Ray Rogers on surveillance footage. While they were there, a red Budweiser T-shirt was purchased.
Okay. And sir, as I'm sure you're aware, Budweiser, Anheuser-Busch, their main facility is in St. Louis, Missouri. Is that correct?
It's possible, I don't know.
White cooler. What is the significance of the white cooler?
Again, in speaking with Ms. Showmaker,
Mhm.
she said that Mr. Rogers brought items home with him, one of which was a white cooler.
And in fact, you believe that he left the white cooler, correct? That white cooler was with Mr. Rogers for the entire trip to and from Florida.
It's possible.
Okay. What kind of, if you know, was the cooler subjected to any type of scientific tests?
I don't know offhand.
Okay. So you can't tell me if it was subject to any type of alternative light?
That would be a question better asked of our crime scene technicians.
Okay. Let's move on to the black backpack. What is the significance of the black backpack?
Again, per Ms. Showmaker's statement, it has relevance based on the information that the suit was potentially in a black backpack.
Okay. So if I think I understand what you're saying, is that black backpack is the same one that went with Mr. Wright and Mr. Rogers to Florida and then back again. Is that correct?
It's possible, yes.
So then, that same backpack would have been the backpack that would have held the jumpsuits on the trip back. Is that correct?
Possibly.
Okay. So that backpack then could contain hair fiber from Dr. Sievers, correct?
Potentially.
It could contain DNA or blood from Dr. Sievers. Is that correct?
Potentially.
Okay. It could contain fibers from the inside of the Elantra that they drove in, correct?
You know,
Potent-
objection's going to call, it's calling for speculation, Your Honor.
Overruled.
Potentially.
Okay. So, you would agree with me that if that backpack had things inside of it that were used during the murder, that you would want to have that tested and you would want to know what type of scientific evidence we could get out of that backpack. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Ross talked to you a little bit about discovering that jumpsuit. Remember you've seen 3 jumpsuits, okay? The first one you showed up was the one that you found by the side of the road. Remember that?
Yes.
And then the next 2 were kind of, we'll call them samples, right? So the one that was found by the side of the road, it was, you said a half-mile east of Cadet Road on 47, is that correct?
Yes.
That road had a 45-mile-per-hour speed limit, is that correct?
I'm not sure.
And you took photos of the jumpsuit as you found it, is that correct?
Yes.
Additionally, you took video of Ms. Showmaker leading you and finding the jumpsuit, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and when you took the video, it's a short video, correct?
Yes.
And did you prep Ms. Showmaker for the video, or did she say, here it is, and you said, hold on, let me get my phone out?
I don't understand the question.
How did you make the video of Ms. Showmaker finding the jumpsuit?
We located the jumpsuit. She brought us to the area. I saw the jumpsuit. When we got out of the vehicle, I told her, don't touch the suit, don't go over there. I'm going to do an introduction. I'm going to ask you some questions, and then I'm going to have you take me over to the suit.
Okay. And where's Mr. Schooneman when you found the suit?
He is, I don't know where he is, actually.
He wasn't with you and Ms. Showmaker?
He was not.
Okay. Did you find anything else alongside with the suit? Any gloves, anything else that would have been discarded?
No.
Did you submit that suit for testing?
I can't say for certain.
Okay. Would you agree with me that if that suit was used in the murder, that there's likely to be some type of biological evidence on it?
Not necessarily, no.
Okay. But you'd still want to find out if there was any potential blood on that jumpsuit, correct?
Yes.
If the wrists and the ankles were taped up, you'd want to look for tape residue, is that correct?
Yes.
You'd want to look for the presence of hair, pet hair, Dr. Sievers' hair, or either Mr. Wright's hair, and, body hair, obviously, or Mr. Rogers' hair, correct?
Potentially, yes.
Okay. You'd also want to have that suit examined for the presence of DNA, correct?
Yes.
I mean, you would agree with me, if there's DNA on that suit, boom, I mean, it's a direct connection to that crime scene, correct?
Yes.
And did I understand your testimony right? You said Ms. Showmaker led you to the suit, you took her home, and it wasn't until the following day when she was able to lead you to the two pieces of the cell phone.
Yes.
Okay. Why the delay in between finding the suit by the side of the road on Cadet and the cell phone by Doe Run?
Well, in speaking with her, she mentions the cell phone. It's already nighttime, so the chances of walking on the side of the road in the middle of the night are probably going to yield negative results at that point. And also, it gave her an opportunity to go home, see her children, relax, get a good night's sleep. We could follow up with her tomorrow.
Okay. Ms. Ross asked you about gathering information on different prepaid phones. Do you remember that?
Yes.
You said you gathered information on a 404 number. Do you recall that?
Yes.
You gathered information on an 858 number. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Do you recall if you ever gathered information on a 702 number?
Yes.
Okay. And why would you gather information on a 702 number?
It was brought to my attention by our analyst, Myra Simmons, that it may have a connection to the 404 number.
Okay. And was she able to further elaborate on what that connection was?
Yes.
Okay. And what was that connection?
Later, we would find out that the 702 number would travel with Mr. Wright's personal phone number in Missouri at the time when he was down here committing the offense.
Okay. And were you able to draw any educated inferences from that?
Objection to calling, it is calling for speculation.
Sustained.
Ms. Showmaker, she spoke to you about Crime Stoppers. Do you recall that?
No.
You don't recall her speaking to you about Crime Stoppers?
No.
right, sir, thank you. I have nothing further.
Briefly, Your Honor. How far was the cell phone parts you found from the blue jumpsuit, time-wise, in terms of driving?
Probably upwards of about 45 minutes.
Thank you. Your Honor, might I approach the clerk for just a moment?
You may.
Thank you. Counsel asked you items of significance that were found in the condominium of Mr. Sievers when that search was conducted on July 12th, I believe you said. I just want to show you a couple of photos from that condominium, 56C and 56D. 56C and 56D. May I approach you, Your Honor?
You may.
Are these two of the photos, are these photos that come from that search of that condominium?
Yes, they are.
And do they show, well, fair and accurate representations of the photos of what you saw or what was seen in the condo that day?
Yes.
Move to introduce.
No objection.
Show them admitted.
One of those photos, what do those photos show? Permission to publish, Your Honor.
You may.
I'm going to show you 56C first. What does 56C show?
It is a baggage claim ticket in the name of Mark Sievers from Southwest Airlines.
And is the date of that baggage ticket contained within that receipt?
Yes.
And is that the 4/30/2015 at 2:45 p.m. date?
Yes.
And showing you State's Exhibit 56D. Was that also found within the condominium?
Yes.
And is that a letter addressed to Mr. Sievers?
Yes.
And the return address, if we can all, it's hard to see if you're standing too far away, but does that say care of Wainwright? Does that say something with care of Wainwright?
Yes.
And was the airline tag actually recovered from the apartment?
I can't say for certain right now.
Did Taylor Showmaker tell you when Mr. Rogers had thrown that suit on the side of that rural road in Missouri that you found with her in August 25th of 2015?
I'm sorry, one more time.
Had Taylor Showmaker told you when that blue suit you found on the side of the rural road in Missouri, when the suit you found August 25th, did she tell you when that suit was thrown
Yes,
there? When was that suit thrown there?
in early July.
No further questions, Ron?
First witness?
Yes, sir, what are you approaching with?
I'm approaching with 56D.
Okay.
Sir, that's the letter with the return address for Mr. Wright. What's the postmark on that?
July 30th.
What year?
Looks like 2002.
Okay. Is it fair to say that's a pretty old letter?
Yes.
Okay. And you said that you believe that the jumpsuit was thrown by the side of the road in early July. When was it recovered?
It was recovered on August 25th of 2015.
And so between August and 25th, that jumpsuit then stayed pretty much right where it was discarded?
Objection calls for speculation.
Sustained.
In fact, by August 25th, Ms. Showmaker was already starting to be a little more in need for money. Is that correct?
Objection calls for speculation.
Sustained.
You had to rely upon the representation of Ms. Showmaker to ascertain whether or not that jumpsuit had been thrown by the side of the road in early July. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
You had to rely upon the representations of Ms. Showmaker to ascertain that the jumpsuit had been discarded by the side of the road in early July. Is that correct?
Yeah, she's the one that took me to it.
Okay, and ultimately, you don't know when it was actually discarded there, do you?
Only from what I recovered in her statement.
Thank you, nothing further.
Is this witness to be released or retained?
The state has to release this witness, Your Honor.
Defense has to retain.
You're subject to recall. We'll let you know if you're needed again. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Have both sides approach. Ready. You're right at 5 o'clock. We do have another witness that we probably could complete before 6, but I told you guys 5, we would stop as close as possible as we could. If you guys would like to finish, be done for the day, we can do that. If you would like to continue and take one more witness, we'll let you use the restroom and we'll do it. You guys want to talk for, why don't we let you take a bathroom break, talk about it, and we'll bring you right back out. Please be seated. 5 minutes. You can get the exhibits to the clerk too. Awesome.